It's time for another podcast by George. Straight talk, straight from the heartland, that'll have you saying, "By George, I think he's got it." Now, here's George.
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome back into another podcast by George. Going to be talking politics today. Got our doc back in the house. Time for another house call from Dr. Stephen W. Schmidt, the Lucan Endowed Professor Emeritus of Iowa State University. The guy spent decades, 50 years, teaching the world about American politics. This book that you see off my left side here, it's entitled American Government and Politics Today. He wrote the book literally, and of course he's been on every media platform worldwide for, again, decades, talking about American politics. I'm delighted to have him on the show again today. But before we get to the good doc, I just kind of wanted to editorialize a little bit. Don't like to do a lot of this, but I want to tell folks that, I've been checking out the media ever since Donald Trump went down in flaming ass defeat and Joe Biden won the president's office. And everybody's kind of squared off and gone into their political corners again. And I'm very disappointed by this, folks. I got to tell you something. I mean, on the right, you've got Fox, and they're taking on this victimization persona. They're talking this cancel culture stuff. And to me, that kind of is a way of, they don't want to come out and say that they think the election was stolen any longer. So they're going to just kind of let people assume that. And then they're going to talk about how their culture is being stolen. And you heard it started with Dr. Seuss, but they were doing it before then with Christmas and stuff like that. And they want us all to believe that, an angry horde of deviants is going to, rush the public bathrooms and that they're going to overtake Parkland and Antifa is going to run the government and all that stuff. Okay, so you got Fox on that side. On the left, you got Rachel Maddow and Chris Hayes and those people, and they have done nothing, believe it or not, since the insurrection, or really since the election, to talk Donald Trump. My God, he's on there every 15 minutes, maybe less. They're talking Trump, Trump, Trump. They want you to believe that we're going to be overrun by gun-toting vigilantes, that they're going to come after our government with guns strapped on their asses like they did at the Capitol, crawl through our windows, and they're doing this for ratings. They're doing it for sensationalism. They're doing it for fear, which is how propaganda works. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing pro wrestling political propaganda on cable television every night. And of course, the print media has a role in this also. Don't want to leave out the New York Times and the Washington Post. But anyway, that's my beginning. That's my open. That's what I'm seeing out there. I want to bring in the good doctor. Welcome back to a podcast by George, Dr. Stephen W. Schmidt.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be on with you.
I want to start off, Doc, by, and this kind of segues from what I was talking about. I want to bring up this video. It's going to take a couple of minutes for people to watch this, but I want them to check this out. Now, this is Tulsi Gabbard on Fox. Now, I don't watch Fox. I mean, I get accused sometimes of being because I'm a lefty, a real hard lefty, of being like a Trump supporter or something like that. I'm not a Fox guy, but I do check them out online once in a while, and I check out Tulsi Gabbard. So let me bring this clip up. She's being interviewed on Fox by this former U.S. representative. Doc knows all about him, Trey Gowdy. He's from South Carolina. He had a big role in the Benghazi thing and the impeachment hearings and all that stuff. He's not in Congress any longer, as Tulsi Gabbard isn't either. So he's interviewing her on this show, and I'm going to spare you the beginning with him because, honest to God, he's on there talking about when he was a kid, how his mother wouldn't let the kids watch Gilligan's Island. Took him to the movie Grease and walked out of the theater. And he's kind of blubbering almost on Fox about how he misses that and he doesn't want the cancel culture to prevent his mother from being able to take care of those kids. God, you couldn't watch Gilligan's Island? I'll make it. Here's the point, Doc. I mean, about this, honest to God, he's a like a lot of these legislators, he's a prosecuting attorney. He's a smart guy. I mean, I look at this guy. Yeah, he's a smart guy. But when it comes to electing these legislators, we got to get beyond that. And electing these federal prosecutors and people like that, we need to have people that are I don't know, that are social, that have a social conscience, that are not like this Trey Gowdy guy. We need people, to my mind, like Tulsi Gabbard. I want you to take a look at the difference here in this clip, and let me bring this up.
How we treat the minority matters, because they may not be in the minority forever. Most of all, I hope we can apply the same standard of fairness to others that we want applied to us. Joining me now, former Congresswoman from the great state of Hawaii, Tulsi Gabbard. Hey, Tulsi, how are you?
Aloha, my friend. It's good to talk to you, as always.
Likewise. All right. I used to turn to you when we were serving together for guidance. Tell me what the cancel culture is and why we should be concerned with it.
Well, you rightly started this conversation talking about freedom. When you look at the foundation of our democracy, it is based on this ideal, this principle of freedom of speech, freedom for every single one of us to be able to share our ideas and debate them, to argue them, to agree or to disagree, to pick and choose in this marketplace of ideas those that we deem to be right or wrong, to be superior or inferior, and even for those ideas that may be misleading or dangerous, that in this free marketplace, we have the right to then defeat those ideas with superior ones. And others have the freedom to choose what they want to believe or not to believe, or what they want to adhere to. So when you look at this question, what is cancel culture? Cancel culture is the opposite of this. It is exactly the opposite of this foundational principle of our democracy. It means that in a cancel culture, you have some people who believe that they are special, that they are superior, that they have the power to be able to shut down those who have ideas and views that are different, who may follow a path that they deem to be the wrong path, and will therefore say, nope, we're going to place obstacles in front of you, we're going to silence certain voices so that only those who agree with us in the path that we deem to be right is the one that is before you to choose. And the issue with this, there's a few issues, but the main issue with this is when you look at our rights and freedoms, and our ability to debate them and respectfully come out the other end agreeing or disagreeing, as you and I have over the years, it's based on the fact that we are all children of God. And recognizing that, we then treat each other with respect and respect this freedom that we have. So let's look down the path and say, okay, well, where does this cancel culture lead us? You see the final expression of cancel culture in Islamist terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, who basically go and behead those who are they deem to be infidels or heretics in order to silence them, in order to protect others from being misled by those heretical ideas in the eyes of an ISIS or Al-Qaeda. And so when we look at cancel culture here at home, we see those efforts to cancel or silence those that they don't want the people to hear from, those who may offer a different idea than the one that those in power want people to see or to hear or to be exposed to. And so this is, when we look at the foundations of our democracy, this is the danger of where this path leads us unless we as individuals stand up against it. And that's the final point I want to make on this is, what can we do? Because I get asked this a lot. What can we do to stand up against this cancel culture, this fear-mongering, this bullying, that if you don't adhere to this path that those in power say is the right one, then you are at risk of losing your job. You are at risk of losing family or friends, or being unpopular, or losing likes on social media. This requires us to ask the question of ourselves, who are we trying to please? And this is something for me at a really young age. I recognize that life is short. Death can come at any time. And I was happiest and am happiest when trying to live my life to be pleasing to God, to my best friend. And so as I've gone through my life, and especially in politics, the media is coming at you with attacks, political opponents, social media, I have always found that peace and that strength in going within and knowing
You've
that
been great, Tulsi.
God
you
has
ain't afraid of
unconditional
nothing.
love for all of us.
So that's Tulsi Gabbard. Honest to God, I really like that. And a lot of people are criticizing her now because she's going on Fox. Well, here's the point, folks. They won't put her on MSNBC or CNN. Now, this is a Democrat. This is somebody that served our country, not only in the U.S. House of Representatives, but she's current active military. She's a former presidential candidate who got delegates, by the way, which Kamala Harris didn't, just as a reminder. But she's somebody that deserves to be heard. She can't get that platform. She goes on Fox, but she's reaching an audience that needs to be reached. If we're going to change anything in this country, I believe it has to be by us speaking to one another. Rachel Maddow talking to exclusively Democrats every night on cable television isn't changing a mind. It isn't going to help us at all. The same is true with Tucker Carlson and with Sean Hannity on the right on Fox Network. I'll give you an example of how I know it works. I saw Jimmy Dore on Tucker Carlson here a couple of weeks ago, and he had talked about Julian Assange. Tucker Carlson didn't know much about Assange, surprisingly, but he admitted right on air that Jimmy Dore changed his mind about Assange and was now an Assange supporter. It can be done if you go at it in this format and in this way. And her countenance, the way she handles Gowdy in this film clip, I thought was just excellent. I thought this was very revealing.
Well, every once in a while, Fox gets a nugget. Let's say that. It has on people who are not necessarily part of the, conservative movement and the pro-Trump group and so on. And that's interesting in itself because, as you said, a lot of the mainstream networks, cable networks, and shows are pretty one-sided and pretty partisan. I know that you're an optimist and I'm a pessimist, and so I'll just say back to you, there isn't any way in hell that you can convince some of the people that are on the left that the conservatives are okay, that pro-life is all right, that prayer in the schools is acceptable, that people who are concerned about this or that or the other on the right may have a point. And there are no people that are real hardcore conservatives on the right who are going to, I think, yield an inch to, arguments that conflict with their views. We are a hardened bunker society. We are in our bunkers. We're armed. Talking to a fellow the other day down at the dog park, and he tried to buy some ammunition for a shotgun or something. He said, there's no ammunition in any of the gun stores that he went in, not a single bullet. Now, what does that mean? A lot of hunting going on, not this time of year, but Americans are armed, locked, and loaded. And, I'm an old guy. I don't fear for myself, but I sure fear for my family, my children, grandchildren in the family. Because I think we're headed where a lot of countries in the world are headed, which is more confrontation. And I hope it doesn't end up with a lot of blood and death. I hope that at some point we pull back from that. But I'm not very optimistic. I don't think you can convince people. I mean, look, there are people bringing their children to burn their masks because masks in Idaho, because masks are evil, democratic, left-wing, socialist, political things. And the doctors who wear protective masks during surgery and have for the last 50 years or more are a bunch of communists. Really? You're going to go to them and say, here's a mask, please wear it? I saw some video on one of the news programs just yesterday night or whenever, down there in Florida and Miami and South Beach. The cops are racing around in their vehicles and their ATFs and stuff and trying to give people face masks, and people are just throwing them in the ditch. We're an undisciplined society. We're not like in Japan, all school children have to have black hair. And if they don't have black hair, they have to dye it black. And school children are required to wear white underwear. And they do. And they all stand in line and say, yes, sir. We're not that kind of society. We're the Wild West. We're still the Wild West, George. Don't try to make us into some sort of Frenchies or Europeans,
Well, here's what I'll say about that, other than the Jimmy Dore circumstance that I cited there. If you look at that film clip with Tulsi Gabbard, when she comes on there, she has a smile on her face. She doesn't have hate on her face. She doesn't have disgust there. You got to remember now, Elizabeth Warren won't even go on Fox. I mean, that's because she doesn't want to be taken apart, I think, but she won't even appear on the platform. So I got to give Tulsi that. The other thing I would say is when I look at this cable news every night and the two sides of the spectrum that I talked about, let's take, for example, the left. What good is it doing anyone for Maddow and those folks on MSNBC every night to be coming on and vilifying Republicans and talking about Donald Trump? There isn't anybody that's watching those shows. You talked about no one. I'm talking about 0% that is a Trump supporter that's going to have their mind changed, or a Republican that's going to become Democrat. So what's the point of that? They do that because it's ratings. People that watch that like that. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy that they're watching. What could they be doing instead? To my mind, they could be talking about things that Democrats overwhelmingly support. They could be pushing people within their own party. They have influence there. Those people are watching and can be affected by what they're presenting. And I'm talking about Medicare for All, the Green New Deal, the $15 minimum wage, a $2,000 COVID check instead of $1,400. They want an end to these foreign wars. I mean, those things are very difficult to get. We've been waiting on them my entire lifetime. But if they spent their time trying to influence and push the people that are watching their shows, maybe we could get some of these things instead of constantly attacking the other side, which I think is not only non-productive, I think it's counterproductive.
I couldn't agree more with you. And the reason why we are bunkered down is because that's the direction that social media has gone. That's the direction that cable has gone. That's the direction that political parties have gone. I mean, there were some things in that bill that was passed, which is enormous and costly, and we're going to have tax increases and all that, that the Republicans certainly could have supported, selectively things. But the Republicans reject all of it. They make fun of the fact that there's some money for, child care for low-income families and things that, where our country is lagging way behind. Republicans could at least also put forth some of those things on their own and try to get Democrats to join them and pass legislation that, is not progressive in the left-wing sense, but that helps the country and helps people in towns and communities. And I don't see that happening. I mean, I watched Fox all the time because, and I used to listen to Rush Limbaugh because I want to know what conservatives are thinking, how they are analyzing things. I listen to them. I rarely comment on whether I agree or not, because that's not my role. My role is to understand. And, there are a lot of issues that conservatives, find very important in their lives that Democrats are never going to agree on either. So, let's find a few things that we can all agree on and pass legislation and try to make decisions based on that. One of the things I think I've mentioned to you, I'm getting emails and I'm even getting phone calls from former Iowans, people who are now living in other places saying, what is going on with the Democrats that they're trying to take away the congressional seat from the Republican in the 2nd district in Iowa? That sounds like what Trump was trying to do with, the presidential election. And so you got things like that popping up that if there was ever any effort to reconcile, boom, that right away, people have to, go on one side or the other of, of the team. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I mean, yes, it was such a close election. I think they should have gotten together and said, let's run it again. Let's do another election and see if we can get some, it was an inconclusive election, whatever, 7-vote difference or something out of hundreds of thousands of votes is not reassuring. But those things all are fuel for this fire of division that we have.
Well, I'll tell you where I come down on it. It won't surprise you at all, but there's such a little difference between these elected representatives. There is a downside to that, and you just identified it. To me, it's not worth it. There are traditional channels for addressing this through the electoral process and through the legal system. They should use those. They should exhaust those. I would not put the House of Representatives and government in the role of overturning an election like this. It just adds fuel to the fire. And to my mind, it's not worth it. And that war vote where our Democrats voted with the Republicans to extend the war in Afghanistan and fund the National Defense Authorization Act and all of that, they're all about the same anyway, folks. Honestly, God, I wouldn't go there to do that. But I wanted to talk, and you mentioned it briefly, this COVID relief bill. I'm also bemused, if you watch the mainstream media, if you watch CNN, MSNBC, they'll tell you about how wonderful and how much progressive stuff's in this bill. And I'm going to put up on screen here this meme. And this is Fiora Isabella. She's with the Convo Couch podcast. I would recommend that people watch that. This is what Fiorella says. Democrats passed the stimulus without a single Republican vote, and they still lowered unemployment from $600 to $300, refused to give the full $2,000, which was promised ad nauseum. I don't know if folks remember that, particularly with that Georgia election down here. Those $2,000 checks, they even had graphics showing a $2,000 check. They were supposed to go out immediately. That was promised from everybody from Joe Biden on down. As you know, it ain't $2,000, it's $1,400. Plus the 600 earlier equals to 2,000. Oh, brother. It didn't include the shoe-in $15 minimum wage and retracted on student loan debt relief. Democrats are useless, and their opposition is theater. So that's Fiorella and her take on it. And what isn't in that meme, and it has to be brief, but what she's getting at with this, Doc, and it's the fact that this was considered to be a must-pass bill. They thought both sides were going to pass a COVID relief bill. They wanted the House Democrats, and particularly the progressives, to dig in on this $15 minimum wage in a pandemic, which is COVID relief, to frontline workers, to the people that are cleaning the bathrooms, packing the meat, shoveling the shit in the dairy barns, literally. They wanted them to get that $15 minimum wage for those folks, and they let themselves be overruled by a parliamentarian in the Senate, and it's just gone poof. But so my point is, the progressives are not that happy with this bill. What's your take on it?
Oh, George, tell Fiorella that, of course, she's frustrated. Tell Fiorella that George is frustrated. Tell Fiorella that progressives are frustrated. But also tell her there were several Democrats who were not going to vote for this thing if it had the $15 an hour minimum wage. And without their vote, the whole bill wouldn't have passed. I mean, you can say they should have passed it, but there was not 100% cohesion and agreement among the Democrats. And the Democrats barely have control of the House. And certainly they have no control of the Senate. The only, it's 50-50. And then the vice president has to go down there and vote to break the tie. So when you don't have a majority that will support these things, you just can't do it. How are they going to pass the $15 minimum wage when you had several, Manchin and several other Democrats that said, oh, no, I'm not going to vote for that because in my state or in my district in the House, but in my state, that's the death sentence and I won't get reelected, so I won't support it. You got to have the votes. I mean, without the votes, you can't do it.
Well, here's what they would say now, and you've got much more knowledge about this than just about anybody, Doc, but they would say that it took, a year to get 3 of these COVID relief payments to Americans. True, the Senate bill was sent back to the House. They wanted the House to reinsert this $15 minimum wage, have the progressives refuse to vote for it unless it was. It only took 6 of them. They've got this block. They've got this leverage now in the House, which is very unique. If they would ever use it, they could do something like it. They could send it back to the Senate and Manchin and those folks that you mentioned. And a lot of people would say, well, it took a year. I don't care if it takes 3 or 4 more days. I don't care if it takes 3 or 4 more weeks. I don't care how many times they've got to send it back and forth. Fight for it. work it out, make some sausage, and have this happen. Do you think that could occur or not?
But your point is that the fight is worth it, even if the whole package blows up and disappears, because that's what would have happened. I mean, if they had fought it, we wouldn't have any of those checks that are going out this week. We wouldn't have any of the stuff that's in this enormous bill. And the Republicans would be happy as hell because, they don't want any of this stuff.
Well, the only thing I will say is that we can move at light speed when it comes to helping the 1% and the oligarchs, so to speak. And the CARES Act was a perfect example of how quickly that flew through. It's just when it comes down to the people and to these essential frontline workers that are making what is it, $7.25 an hour? They haven't had a raise since 2007, and it was like 50 cents back then. I mean, my God, it's just pitiful. So talking about that $15 minimum wage, Doc, the next must-pass bill that's looming, in other words, a bill that both sides want to approve. My God, Donald Trump was talking about this, is an infrastructure bill. They're saying that will pass, and the progressives are already saying, let's put that $15 minimum wage in there because like with COVID relief, where those people were being paid for the work they're doing in a pandemic, the $15 minimum wage is not pork in an infrastructure bill. Those people are going to be doing the labor, a lot of it, in these infrastructure projects. Let's get them a $15 minimum wage in this must-pass bill on infrastructure. Do you think that's a possibility?
It's a possibility, but you got to remember, Republicans don't believe that the government should tell businesses how much to pay their employees. Republicans say, look, it's like in Karl Marx's day. Karl Marx said, it's a supply and demand, and there is massive supply of labor. You can pay workers whatever you want because they're going to be desperate to work. And Marx, basically said, surplus labor is a bad thing because people are going to say, well, I'm going to pay you $5 an hour. And there are going to be a lot of people who are going to say, okay, fine, I need something. So they're going to go for the $5 an hour. So the government setting things like the price, of labor is very unpopular among free market conservatives, and people who believe that the marketplace should determine all these things. I'm not sure that you can get that. You can try to get it into that infrastructure bill, but I'm not even sure the infrastructure bill is going to pass.
If we don't address these issues that are American people are demanding, basically, particularly Democrats, this is all going to change. The midterms are next year. They're in 2022 for God's sake. And I would just like the progressives to vote as a block, use their leverage in the House, and to get some of these truly progressive initiatives into this legislation that we're sending up to the Senate. But we're out of time, Doc. I just want you to put a bow on it for us here. Wrap us up in closing, something that we didn't talk about or something that you want to say as we end this edition.
Well, my eyes are on the Mexican border because, the Democrats were sure that kindness and children, taking care of them and immigrants and stuff was going to be a good deal. But we are now suddenly really overwhelmed.
Well, we'll be following along. We'll be watching the Doc. I saw Dr. Politics on television just this past week, Doc. I mean, you're still active. You're still out there doing it. I mean, you're still the person people turn to for the perspective.
I love talking to you folks because it makes me think much harder when I know I'm going to be asked difficult questions. It makes me look at life in a much more sharp way than if I'm just shoveling my driveway or sitting around drinking a beer.
That's great. Doc, thanks again for coming on a podcast by George.
Thank you, sir.
And everybody, if you enjoy that, if you like these perspectives that we have, and I'm a little bit different than the Doc, and we're a lot different than a lot of people, so you're getting a different look on this podcast, please follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube and iTunes and the iHeartRadio app or any place where podcasts are seen or heard. But that's going to wrap it up. That's going to do it for this one, folks. That's all there is, and there ain't no more. That's another podcast by George.